continue in prayer. God of what is to come, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. I want you to imagine a guy who has been divorced twice, a guy who has cheated on his wife, a guy who has used bogus claims to try to weasel his way out of paying debt, a guy people describe as simply a big jerk. Imagine that guy. You have him in your head? All right, now imagine a world in which that guy is held up as the epitome of success. Imagine a world in which people actually pay money for books that are written by that guy about how to be that guy. And imagine a world in which people compete on a reality TV show for a chance to learn from that guy. Imagine that world. Imagine our world. The show is The Apprentice, and the guy is obviously Donald Trump. In the book, The Broken American Male, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach questions why a man like Donald Trump is held up in our society as this great image of success, when in many aspects of his life, including his family life and you could say his dignity, Mr. Trump could be thought of as a complete failure. But people buy his books, and they want to be like him solely because he has reached what our culture defines as success, especially success for men. He has enormous wealth, power over other people, unparalleled fame, cowboy brazenness, and the acquisition of young, beautiful women. For Rabbi Shmuley, this warped, masculine ideal of success as wealth, power, and fame is the single greatest threat to manhood in our society. And Rabbi Shmuley is just one out of many people who feel that there is something awry with manhood today. There's some kind of crisis going on for men in our society. Books are coming out with titles like The Disposable Male, The Decline of Men, and Maureen Dowd's Are Men Necessary? And today's I've Always Wondered question hits on the crisis by asking why manhood has a declining role in our society. Now everyone has an opinion about what's really going on behind this crisis. Many people think that the traditional measures of masculinity, things like being the primary breadwinner and having power over women, those measures of masculinity have simply expired. And our culture just has had a hard time finding a new measure of masculinity to replace it with. If father knows best starts earning less than mother, then what? If John Wayne is found to be emotionally distant, then what? What's next? There's a blog that's called The Art of Manliness, and it has an article that gives its author's definition of manhood. And they say that there are two ways of defining manhood. The way that they define it, and the way that I think it can be a positive way of defining manhood, is manhood as the opposite of childhood. So childhood leads to manhood and womanhood, and this blog happens to be about manhood. But there's another way to define manhood, and that way is manhood as the opposite of womanhood. And that is a very dangerous and unfortunately a very common way of defining manhood. That is a manhood that cannot survive women's liberation and equal rights. And yet, that manhood lives on today in our society. It defines itself as whatever is not feminine. And it defines the feminine as whatever is bad, and whatever is bad as feminine. And these, of course, are very easy to spot in beer commercials. So I'm going to tell you about a beer commercial I saw in a recent Miller Lite advertising campaign. They have these commercials where this guy walks up to a bar and he asks for a light beer. And the bartender is this, of course, this very attractive young woman. And she asks, "Do you care what the beer tastes like?" And the guy says, "Oh no, anything's fine." And then the attractive woman bartender gives him some generic brand of light beer, and she says, "When you get rid of your skirt, I'll give you a Miller Lite." And then as the guy walks away, you see that he's wearing this frilly, flowery skirt. And then the announcer says, "Man up," and then says some nice things about Miller Lite. Now, the message of this commercial is, of course, if you like any old light beer, you're acting like a skirty woman. And that is the most embarrassing thing that you could ever do. But if you want to guarantee that you won't be embarrassed by looking like a woman and ordering a light beer, order a Miller Lite, and that will guarantee your manhood, right? It's very manipulative, right? So that is manhood defined as the opposite of womanhood. And you will find that kind of thing all over in the media. I'm sure you can think of some things right now. Now the problem with that today is that women are no longer sitting back and letting men define womanhood and the feminine anymore. Men don't get to say that feminine is ditzy and dependent and docile. Women today are defining the feminine for themselves. And today it is perfectly feminine to achieve academically and be the head of a family and become civically engaged and to have a successful career. And the problem is that for some men, if womanhood means having academic success and entering into certain careers, it kind of ruins those things for men. And that is a crisis. Elementary and high schools are reporting that it's becoming uncool for some boys to care too much about school. Colleges are reporting that boys make up only 40% of their students. And elite universities are saying that they are having to admit lower quality boys to maintain a 50-50 gender ratio in their schools, which means that boys are being treated as an underrepresented minority in those schools. So caring about school for some boys is becoming a feminine thing, and if their masculinity depends on the opposite of femininity, that's a crisis. And the crisis doesn't end with education. Many of the jobs that are predicted to grow in the coming decades are jobs that are traditionally dominated by women, known as pink-collar jobs. Nurses, medical assistants, teachers. And the jobs that are expected to decline, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, are traditionally dominated by men. So you would think that men would just start getting into these pink-collar industries, right? But unfortunately, there's this feminine stigma to these jobs. For example, have you guys seen the film Meet the Parents? So in this film, the main male character, his name is Greg, he is a nurse. And so you would think at the beginning of the film, oh, what a forward and progressive film.